Well, thank you so much for staying with us, and thank you again to Bull Country Compost for sponsoring our show each and every week. Such a blessing to have such a great product so close to home. So the next question that we had was about poison ivy, and it seems like every year someone is battling poison ivy. And how can I kill poison ivy? What do I need to do? I'm sure probably earlier this year we've talked about poison ivy. Poison ivy is a tough one, and it can be very, very difficult to control for several reasons, because sometimes if you are someone that is very, very susceptible to the poison ivy, you pull that plant. It doesn't matter if you wash your hands immediately, it seems like you still get the rash. Others, you pull it year after year, you spray it, and it still comes back. And it is very, very tough to get rid of. And little of a backhoe digging it up. Sometimes it seems like, people have a really difficult time controlling poison ivy. You can do it. And I guess our question mostly is, how can I control poison ivy organically? I know people that can control it for me, with some crazy chemical, but this is in a spot where I don't want to use a chemical, or I don't want to use a chemical at all under any circumstances. And so we really do suggest the Weed Beater Botanical, or the new Burnout 2. It's really, the product is about the same. It is made up of a citric acid and a clove oil. It's very high, if you get the concentrate, very, very high concentrations. And it can be controlled, but you're going to need to do it. You can't some people are like, oh, can I just spray that stalk? And that stalk isn't going to do it. You really need to spray the leaf tissue and the stalk. And sometimes, I think I've even recommended this in the past, if you can drill a hole down in, if your stalk is big enough that you can drill a hole in, and then pour your product down in that hole and let it seep into that cambium layer of the plant and really soak it in. And you're probably going to need to do these things 2, 3, or even 4 times. So poison ivy organically is very difficult to control. And like I said before, it's hard to control even chemically, but extremely difficult to control organically if you cannot get close to it. If you can't pull it time and time again of pulling it, you can, cut off photosynthesis. But if you can't get close to it, the Burnout 2 or the Cleanup Botanical is going to be your best bet, and using them at a high concentration. So the rest of the show, I'd sort of like to dedicate to harvesting. And right now, many of you are harvesting. I see posts on Facebook. I'm harvesting my tomatoes right now, and I'm looking for some cilantro, or I'm looking for some basil. If you're making salsa and you need cilantro, come on over to the store. We have pots of it for sale, and basil the same way. Also, if you say, you know what, I don't want to buy a pot. I just want to cut a couple pieces off. I'm only making a little bit of sauce. I don't need a whole plant. We will sell it by the stem as well, so if you are looking to do that. But harvesting is a time that is, reaping all of the great joys of our hard work. And when we're doing this, sometimes we're looking in anticipation to all the work that we have ahead of us. We're out there and we're picking the tomatoes and we're picking the green beans, and we're like, oh, this is great, but oh my goodness, now I have to, preserve them somehow. Or, if you're only doing a little bit and you're just cooking them for dinner, it's not a big deal. But if you did a lot, we grow lots and lots of tomatoes so that we can make sauce and salsa. I have friends that do lots of green beans, and thank goodness they do, because I don't. And then they give me their excess green beans so that I can can green beans as well. So when we're doing our harvesting, it is a time that even though we're anticipating that work, it's sort of like our Christian walk. You witness to someone, or you've been praying for them, and then they see that healing come, and somehow emotionally, physically, that healing comes. And so it's just such a joy. So I really encourage you when you're doing your harvesting of your vegetable gardens to think of it like that. It is such a rejoicing time of look at all of your labor, that you have put out in the last couple months and have that harvest. But there's some things that we have to think about while we're doing this joyous thing. If you are organic, you really don't need to do much of anything but rinse stuff off before you're getting ready. If you are someone that didn't grow your own and you are purchasing from a farmer's market, a roadside stand, your fresh produce, even if it was grown organically, we don't know if they were dirty little hands when they were picking your product. So this has nothing to do with COVID or anything like that. But, I have to think about this when I'm harvesting. So what was I doing before I started harvesting? Was I out gathering eggs where I could have, bacteria or something on my hands? So when I'm harvesting, even though the plant was grown organically, if I was just out, cleaning out a stall or gathering eggs, I have that bacteria on my hands. And if I'm touching that product or that tomato or whatever it is that I'm harvesting, that's going to be transferred over. So we need to make sure that we are washing our vegetables and our fruits good when we're done harvesting, especially, like I said, if you weren't the one harvesting, if you didn't just come from the sink and you had washed your hands and you go harvest, then you're not really sure. So it always is a good idea to make sure that you clean your vegetables. There are products that you can do that with. We have a Sanidate product that you can squirt on them, and that kills all the bacterias, anything that could be on them, and you're ready to go. Or you can soak them in some vinegar water for a few minutes, wash them all like that, and then rinse them, and they're ready to go. But you just want to make sure that you are cleaning them very good. Also, you want to make sure that the jars, if you are canning, that the jars that you have been sanitized, cleaned very well, and your rings and your lids as well. You're going to have a better seal rate if you have done these things and followed these procedures. The other thing is, if you salt or season in any way whatever you're canning, after it's in the jar and you just sprinkle it on top, you really want to make sure that grain of salt, that grain of garlic powder is off the top of the jar. So you really want to make sure that you're always wiping the top of that jar, because just that tiny little speck will cause your jar not to seal. And this is a lot of work. Canning is not, just something that takes a couple minutes. You're really going to be investing some time in this. And you want to make sure that your jars seal on the first time. So you want to make sure that your jars are really, really clean. And I don't recommend, using some kind of a chemical wash or anything like that. Just good soapy water, rinsed really well, and then if you are doing a bath, your jar will go into the bath, and you're going to follow all of your canning procedures. If you do have canning questions, you can always call and ask me, and I can help you walk you through that. But this is a way that you are going to be able to preserve not only your harvest, but maybe someone else's, and have that throughout the winter. Now, if any of you are canning right now, you know that there is a shortage of lids, and some even area people are having a hard time finding jars. But I have jumped on Marketplace and, Craigslist and all of those. Jars are not really the issue in most cases. It's going to be lids that you're having a hard time with. And lids are hard to find. To let you know, we do have some wide mouth lids still left, and we have some small mouth rings still left, and we do have jars too. They're used jars, and we sell them for 50 cents a piece. But we are out of small irregular mouth lids, but we do have the wide mouth. But I like wide mouth anyhow. You can get your hand down in there better. You can get more things stuffed down in that jar. And then when it's coming to cleaning time, you can get your hand down in there to get that jar really, really clean. And so I really like to do wide mouth no matter what, but not just because I'm glad we still have those lids, since that's what I can with the most. But it's really important to make sure that jar is clean, that the fruit or the vegetable that you're putting in your jar is clean and prepared correctly as it's going in your jar, and that you have your lid on correctly with that clean rim, and it goes in your canner, and if you're pressure canning or water bath canning, that you do things in the proper procedure so that it's safe, no one gets hurt, burnt. You have to be careful about all of that, and you want to make sure that you're doing that. And that's on the canning. Now, if you're dehydrating, like I dehydrate tomatoes because I love tomato chips. So you're going to prepare your fruit the same way. Make sure that it's clean, sliced the way you want it, and then it can go on your racks of your dehydrator and put in, turn your dehydrator on to the appropriate amount of time, and you sort of walk away because it's going to take hours and hours and hours, but it doesn't take any of your attention. So you can go about doing your own thing. I mean, I put mine on at night and it just runs all night long. And sometimes if I have things that are thicker, it's going to take even longer, and it'll run the rest of the next day also. But, there's a lot of ways to do that. Freezing, of course, you can freeze a lot of different ways. I know people that doesn't like to freeze in plastic. They only like to freeze in glass. So you can go ahead, just remember if you're freezing a liquid in glass that you have to let room for it to expand. So if you're freezing in glass, you have to make sure that you leave that excess room at the top because you don't want your jars to break or whatever glass container that you are freezing in. And remember also that nutritionally, freezing is probably going to be better in most cases than canning, because canning, you have to cook something so long, you cook a lot of the nutrients out of it. Freezing, on the other hand, that doesn't happen. But some of you, and me included, I really like the taste of canned green beans better than frozen green beans. And I know I've talked to a lot of you and you're the same way. So those are the things that we have to just, balance that out. What is more important, and how much, nutrition are we getting from a frozen green bean that we couldn't get from eating an extra serving of kale? And then go ahead and eat the green beans the way we like them and can our green beans. There's a lot of ways that you can do your preserving. And if you have specific questions, please give us a call at 330-455-5997 or come and visit me at Anthony Petitti Organic Greenhouse at 5828 Columbus Road, right there on the corner of Columbus Road and Broadway, or check us out on Facebook at Anthony Petitti Organic Greenhouse. Thank you so much for being with me, and have a blessed week.